Hello, this is Godfather Ed, and unfortunately I haven't had a solo show for some time. The pandemic affected that, as it's affected just about everything in our life. So this is kind of my launch, and there were some issues, I guess I'll leave it like that, with SMAC, and a lot of those have been resolved, and the atmosphere is back to what it used to be. So I'm glad to be back and glad to be hosting the Godfather show. Today we have a little different tack that we're taking here. I've loved old cars. You know, never been a mechanic or anything close to a good mechanic, but I've always loved cars. And one point in time, in the past, I had a 55 T-Bird, which I was very interested in those cars like since I was a little kid. So today I have a person here, a Stoughtonan, John Taggart, that's going to talk about old cars, including the T-Birds, the two-seat T-Birds, 55, 56, 57, and others. John has been putting car shows together. Matter of fact, he encouraged me to go to a car show at the Endicott Estate in Dedham about a month or so ago, and it was like impressive. I don't want to say much more of that because I don't want to take up John's time. So anyway, John has put these shows together and stuff like this. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and John, you can begin where you like. Again, his name is John Taggart. He's from Stoughton, and if you want to give a little more bio, that's fine, and let's go get him.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
First, I'd like to thank you, Ed, for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem. Appreciate you coming in.
My name is John Taggart. I belong to the Bay State Antique Automobile Club of Dedham. We hold our meetings at the Endicott Estate off of East Street and Sanderson Street. I've been a member of the club for somewhere around 14 years, and I'm the mentor in the club. And the mentor, he's someone that greets people, organizes. In other words, when I bring in people to the club, or the club brings in people, I make them feel comfortable so they're not feeling they're alone sitting in the back of the room. So that's my job. I belong to two other clubs. They're a little smaller. I love automobiles. I have a little description here of early T-Bird Roadsters, 55, 56, 57. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information on that. And then I'm going to switch to Edsels. A lot of people know the T-Birds, the T-Bird Roadsters, but not everybody knows any history about Edsels. And so I have some information that probably most don't know because the Edsels were only around for 3 years. So I'll start out with the T-Birds, but I'll jump to the Edsels afterwards. But I'll also let you know about Henry Ford. In the 1800s, he was excellent with motors and engines and so on. And by early 1920s, over half the vehicles on the road were Fords. And Henry Ford had a son, Edsel Ford, Edsel Bryan Ford. And he had a son, Henry. And Henry had a son, Edsel. So you know where the history's coming from. Henry Ford was born July 30th of 1863, and he lived until 1946, 83 years old. He outlived his son, by twice. His son Etzel was he passed away in 1943, and so Etzel Ford was born in Spring Wells, Michigan. He was the oldest of 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. Etzel was a great designer, and Henry was he was the mechanic. So the 2 of them together were awesome. And Henry was a very intelligent person, but he didn't want his son to take his pride away. So he was very kind of on the mean side to his son, always putting him down. It's amazing that they worked so well together because Henry was on his son all the time, putting him down. So anyway, when Henry Ford was 15 years old, he constructed his first steam engine. And Henry's lifelong mentor was Thomas Edison. And in 1888, Henry married Clara Jane Bryant. And that's how Etzel got his middle name. So the T-Birds were designed to take the popularity away from the Corvette. And the Corvette they made cars in 53 and 54. They were adorable, but they had very little power to them at all. And when the T-Birds started being produced, they produced them with big engines. I personally have a 57 Thunderbird. It's got a 312 engine. It goes like heck. Anyway, the first 3 T-Birds were called Roadster T-Birds because they were 2-seaters. And they're very different, as you see in these first 3 vehicles that I have here. This is a 55. It was the plain Jane. It did not have a vent on the side. The emblem in the front of the car was a Ford emblem. And also on the side was a Ford emblem. And on the gas tank cover, and you fed the gas through the back of the trunk, had a little lever, a little door, and you open the door and you feed the gasoline through the trunk. It was kind of unique. But in 55, people said that they didn't have enough view when the top was on the car. And so in 56, the middle of 56, they came out with a spare tire on the back, which they called the Continental Kit. It was an option on the 55 and 57 T-Birds. But on the 56, it came with the car. And the reason they did that is because there was no space in the trunk whatsoever to put anything with the spare tire in there. And then in 57, they lengthened the car and put fins on the back, little fins. So, and you'll see this on some of the earlier Fords right up until the 60s. You'll see fins on their cars. And the symbols for the T-Birds were all different. Every single T-Bird right up until 2003 had Thunderbirds on them, but every single one was different. So, so the reason I brought these 2 here is you've got you got the hard top. The convertible fit behind the seat, and to put the top up and down is kind of a hard process to put the car up and down, put the top up and down. You have to. It's a two-person job, but you have to have the doors open all the way, because the back seat, or the back of the seat, fits against the armrest. So when you slam on the brakes, you don't go flying through the windshield.
Can't have that.
So you've got to open the doors wide. I've got stuck in a rainstorm, and I just sat under a bridge until the storm was over, because my convertible was in the back. So it's a stationary. You could get the convertible or the top, or you could get the convertible and the top.
John, just to interject, you mentioned that you got caught under a bridge in a rainstorm. Well, the 55 I had some 56 parts on it. It had a Cornell kit on it, and it had the removable fiberglass top. And it was such a pain in the neck to put that top on, especially if you were alone. As you know, they did have a unit you could hang up in a garage, and you could. But anyway, I didn't have a soft top. And I said, who needs a soft top?
Yeah.
So we're going down, I think it was in Plymouth somewhere, buzzing along, and oh man, heavens opened up. And the first thing I did was head for a bridge. So about half an hour later, I decided I think I'll go head for home. You know? So I can verify, because that happened to me too.
Yeah. So. The 55 that you had, actually in black, was awesome. That was an awesome color for a 55, because it was a snub little car, with, and it just looked nice in black. Some cars look nice in one color, they look better in another color. My 57 Thunderbird is, it's like a polar white with a red interior, and it's got a memory seat. I understand that there's only 4 remaining on the 57 T-Birds. And my antenna is in the center of the trunk, which was a option. So my T-Bird is one of a kind. There's no other T-Birds like it. So this 57 here it's got a Continental kit on it, but that was an option. So the only one that really came with the Continental kit was the 56. And the dashboard on the 55 and 56 was similar to the 55 Fords, and the 57 T-Bird was similar to the 56 Ford's dashboard, only it had like a diamond plate in back of it, which dressed it up a little bit more. There's actually more room in the trunk of a 57 than there is in the cab of the car.
John, on the my recollection on the 57, that's a car Ford raced.
Yes,
And
that's correct.
It had a supercharger, I believe.
I believe there was a 4-barrel with a supercharger in it.
Yeah. So I guess it did well on the track, but of course the following year they went in another direction. But yeah, a lot of history in that too. I don't know, I kind of, when I was looking around, I kind of liked the style at 55, 56, and I was able to get that 55, and it was a lot of fun, you know. And then at one point, when I was building my house, I had an opportunity to sell it to a person that would put up the garage. So I wish I didn't trade for the T-Bird for the garage. I wish I had never done that today, but at the time it seemed reasonable.
Well, I've seen your car parts, Ed, so I can picture your little 55. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go into Etzel's, because a lot of you may not know a lot about Roadster T-Birds, but you've probably heard about them, seen a few on the road. But I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to switch over to Etzel's.
You just turn a key on the dashboard and the trunk opens electrically. And here's how easy it is to drive. Can you flick that light switch?
Why, certainly. Anyone can.
then you can drive the Edsel.
That's right. Driving the 1958 Edsel is as easy as flicking a light switch.
The media and General Motors and Chrysler did a number on the car because it was supposed to be the car of the future. It had things on it that even today's cars don't have. I believe it to be one of the prettiest cars of 1958, and you could see the awesome lines on this 58 Edsel. The front, this one particular one is a Citation, and it's got bumperettes, and they're not in the middle of each of these half bumpers, but they're to protect the nose of the Edsel. And part of the propaganda that the car got was that the crest looked like a horse collar, a toilet seat, or a woman's private parts.
Oh, well.
But nevertheless, I believe the car to be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. John, that design grille, with some modifications, seemed to do pretty well on Pontiacs, Firebirds, Pontiacs.
Exactly. They
which
had
is
them,
my second favorite car.
yeah, they had them on Pontiacs, very similar. The Bugatti has a funny-looking front end, and the car was kind of knocked down like the Torpedo was, the 1948 Tucker Torpedo. It got put down before the car was even introduced, and they introduced 51 of those Tucker Torpedoes. The interesting designs on this Edsel, and I'm going to go to this bigger one here. Oh, by the way, Ford and GM were putting out a lot of pink automobiles to get the ladies to be interested in their cars. And Chrysler also did it, but they would blend the colors in. I had a friend that had a Dodge Coronet, a 56 Dodge Coronet that was black, white, and blue, and it was absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, there was a lot of advertising on this car, and one of the items that a lot of people don't know about, right at the very back of this is only in the Citation, there's a little green emblem. It's about that big, and they call it a pickle. And they ran that pickle through 58, 59, and 60. And there was only 3 years that the car was produced. But they had plans on putting the car out in 61 and 62. So 58 had all the glamour on it. And 61 and 62, which they didn't produce, actually, they brought the glamour back. And all the 50s cars had hoods that opened up from the front because they felt that if the hood was going to open, it wouldn't blow out from the wind. So they did that. So,
John, also when you mentioned the pink vehicles, I think, as I recall back in the day, 50s and 60s, pink and charcoal were the colors. Even clothing was, even at the proms, you would see. Really dating ourselves here, aren't we? But yeah, but that combination you can still see if you go to some of the car shows and some of these older vehicles. You'll see the charcoal and pink appointment to it.
The interesting thing about the interior of the 58 Edsel is the instrument panel. It had a tachometer, and the automatic for the citation and all the automatics had tele-ride push-button electric transmission, and you push the buttons in the center of where most people would think it would be a horn in the middle. They had the park and neutral and reverse, and it was a three position transmission, also on the standard, but you didn't get the standard in the citation. You only got the automatic. And Edsel was everywhere. They wanted this car to stick out. So the rear backup lights had a little E at the top of the backup lights. There was Edsel right at the top here in a stainless steel design with the letters Edsel on it. Was Edsel across the, this is the citation, so it's got the fancy, it's not chrome, it's stainless steel, and it has Edsel across it. There's the E in the sight. They call these sights on these cars. And there was E's everywhere. On the hubcaps, there was a big E in the middle. And these hubcap, the center design, you could unscrew them from the back if you wanted to change the color of the hubcap. But the interior, it had a speed gauge that was about this big, and it rotated. No other car in history has had that. And that rotation told you how fast you were going. And there was also a dial on the dashboard that you could adjust, and you could say, okay, I want to go 65 miles per hour. So you set that dial for 65 miles per hour. And the top of the speedometer that rotated turned like a cap, like a baseball cap. The top of it turned red. Huh. It was absolutely unique. I don't know why they didn't keep it. It was spectacular. The dashboards got different because Ford was offering cars 58, 59, and 60, and they were on the wheelbases of the Ford line. And so they changed the model looking every year. So the Edsels were from 58 to 60. They were made from 57 to 59, and they also were planned. Originally they had planned to make the car continuous because it was supposed to be such a spectacular automobile. So the planning was gorgeous in the 58. 59 was more boxy. 1960 was more like this 60 Ford Starliner. Had the little fins on the back, and instead of these oval lights, it had long pickle-like lights. There were two on each side. The outer one was stoplight and tail light, and the inner one was a backup light. This Ford, you could also get reflectors for the 60 that would match the top light on the grille. Something unique about the 60 Edsel, which this isn't, is it had two ovals in the middle covering each headlight. And then the center, it had a pickle again, because they carried that pickle. And there's chrome that, or I should say stainless steel that wrapped around the middle of the car. And it was kind of unique. It was almost like a bumperette on the fender. It was kind of unique. And then there was a thick stainless steel that went right down to the end of the fin. So that's kind of it on that.
John, just a quickie. You were talking about the push-button drive.
Yeah.
They also had those in the 58 Mercuries, I recall.
They did. Yeah, actually, I had a friend who had a 60 Mercury Colony Park. No, it was a, it was a Colony Park. Mercury station wagon, and I used to drive that. It was awesome. But that car was so heavy. It was over 5,000 pounds. And you could feel the car sticking to the road as it drove because it was so heavy. You know, it didn't rock, it didn't bounce, it just went down the road and took all the bumps.
Yeah, the one my friend had was a convertible, so of course that was pretty heavy.
And that's a big car.
But it was funny because when he first got it, it was used, but I mean, when he first got it, he never told anybody about the push buttons in the center. And, you know, and so you'll be riding along, you go, "What are you doing over there?" You know, and it's, "Oh, this is the shift the tranny," you know. So, but the other thing I was going to ask you, as we're talking about, maybe this, I don't know if this is the right time to ask you, but as I recall, the Edsel had a big problem. One of the big problems, not just the competition with the other manufacturers, but it was brought out in '58. And for people, I don't really remember this, you know, because I was quite young then, but there was a recession, the recession of 1958 that the U.S. had. And anytime you have any kind of a economic condition like that, it's really not the time usually to bring out a new product. So they did make the decision, obviously, to bring it out, and so that was another thing that you know, people were conserving the money. Obviously, during a recession time, we're pretty much in one now, as we all know, and I think that hurt them than all the other little picky things that the other manufacturers did. So it was, if it had come out probably just in a few years earlier or after, we'd probably still have them.
Yeah, Ed, you're absolutely right. It was during a recession, and it wasn't a great time to come out with a new model. And they did have a few little problems, or some people might say it's big problems, but one of the problems was they had oil leaks. And the reason for that is one of the reasons for that, they were putting the Citation and the Corsica on a Mercury chassis, and the Pacer and the Ranger were put on a Ford chassis. So there was 5 inches difference in length, 5 inches different in width, and 3 inches different in the height. And they put them on the same assembly line as the Ford and Mercury. So some people got confused. We have two sizes of Edsel on a Ford and a Mercury chassis, and they're all on the same assembly line. The assemblers were putting the wrong parts on the wrong car.
Yeah.
And they had a problem with, in the 58s, they conquered that in 59 and so on. But in the 58s, they had a trunk leak. It would rain and the water would come into the trunk. That's something that can be fixed. And they also had, with the push button, the electric push button transmission, the wires ran across the engine, and the engine would overheat the wires, so there was a little problem with that. And they recommended that you hit neutral and then go into the desired position that you want the car in, reverse or forward or whatever. That didn't become a big problem. People started doing that and then they overlooked it. Some had problems with it, some didn't. But I just think it's a great design. They originally, in '58, well, they had a two-door, four-door convertible and wagon. The wagon, the original '58 wagon, was called a Bermuda wagon. And it came with artificial wood siding. And people commented on the lights in the back were round with a V going the opposite way, so when they put their blinkers on, it looked like the blinker on the left was going right and the blinker on the right was going left. But nowadays they got Nissans with front lights that do that, so why was it not good then and it's all right now? So anyway, originally in '58, they had the main plant for Edsels was in Michigan. They had a plant in New Jersey, Kentucky, California. They also had one in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. And they had an assembly plant in Somerville, Mass., which a lot of people don't know. So,
Excuse me, is that what they call Assembly Square now? That's been...
it's been probably near there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if that's where that name came from.
Yeah.
Where there was an assembly plant there one time. Some of our folks would probably know a lot more about that than I am. I'm just speculating.
In '58, they built 63,110 Edsels in the United States, and they built 4,935 Edsels in Canada, which totals 68,045. In '59, they went way down. They sold 47,396. And they went from having the Citation, the Corsica, the Pacer, and the Ranger. In '59, they only sold the Corsica and Ranger. They had two designs, and an Edsel wagon. And the lights changed on the Edsel wagon drastically. They were two little lights, smaller than, well, probably about the size of a tangerine on either side of the wagon. And in 1960, they sold 2,846. So altogether, they sold 117,287 Edsels, which wasn't too shabby. It was kind of, it could have done better if it wasn't treated so badly. Today, there are somewhere around 1,014 Edsels remaining. And in '58, they dropped the Bermuda wagon and went to a Villager wagon. The Bermuda wagon had Brown's signature on the dashboard, and he was the inventor of the Bermuda wagon. So the car changed drastically because it went from Mercury chassis to Ford chassis, and then it went just to the Ford chassis. And the Corsica and the Ranger and the Villager wagon were of 1959. In 1960, there was the Ranger only and the Villager wagon. And the Ranger had many options, so even though there was only one nameplate other than being an Edsel, you could get many options. So the options were of the other car names that they that they drop, but they you could get various options on them. The 60, the 58 is my favorite. The 60 is kind of my second favorite. And if they had made the 61 and 62 like they had planned, they would also been at the top of the list because they were so beautiful. The lights changed. It's kind of hard to explain what they look like. But
John, what vehicles by the other manufacturers were these designed to compete with?
well,
Or were they just introducing
well,
something totally new?
first of all, Ford put the Edsel out to be a car between the Ford and the Mercury,
Okay.
and then the Mercury and the Lincoln.
Yeah.
There was, cars like the 59 Chevrolet with those big fins. They were a problem because you get a windy day and you're on the highway and the back of the car picked right up.
Oh, is that where I used to hear these Chevys can fly?
Yeah, they flew all right. They flew. I saw. I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young. I was eight years old, maybe, or maybe even earlier. My mother. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and my mother. I'm kind of drowsy in the front seat of the car, and my mother lays out this scream, and there was this 1954 Plymouth heading for this 59 Edsel and was coming on the ramp on the Southeast Expressway. And it hit that 59 Edsel and it went airborne, and it was teetering back and forth on the guardrail like this.
Wow.
And then it finally fell the right way. And we thought, my mother and I thought, that car was going to go over the side. My mother had two cars that were very interesting. They were my favorites. She had a 1954 Plymouth and a 1957 Ford. And her cars were all baby blue until sort of like this color right here, this 57. Until 1960, and she bought a Rambler, and I just buys that car. It was a cute car. It just didn't have anything with it. It was kind of all by itself kind of car. So, but on the 57 Ford that my mom had, I used to sleep up in the back window. And my mother would slam on the brakes, and I'd go flying across the back seat and plow right into the back of her. We had that 54 Plymouth. What was I? I was 6 years old. Ooh. I grew up down Marshfield, and my mother was going up Grove Street in Marshfield off of South River Street. And she hit a dip in the road, and there was ice on the road, and we spun around 3 times. And I was sitting on the front seat on a case of kernel corn. And I ended up on the floor, and the corn, I was buried in cans of corn.
It's quite a memory.
Yeah, it's funny how things like that, stay with you.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
So, I guess your original question was, what kind of competition did they have with the Edsels?
Yeah, not so much competition, but what were they aimed at a certain line in GM or Mopar, or were they just brought out and for the other companies to kind of follow them?
Ford has kind of always been the leader, even if they've had a year that they didn't sell as many cars as GM. It was kind of competition mostly by GM and Ford, trying to produce the most cars to sell. Most of the time, Ford did better than GM. GM also did pretty well certain years. Like the full-size Ford, the 55 Chevy Bel Air outsold the 55 Victoria, but in 56 they had a safety award was given to Ford for their safety in their 56 Fords, and then 57 because of the fins on the GMs. Ford actually sold more again, and then 58 GM took over again. I look at cars like the Edsel, for instance. The 58 was pretty. The 58 Edsel was prettier than the 58 Ford, but the 59 it outsold General Motors, but it wasn't as pretty. The 59 Edsel wasn't as pretty as the 59 Ford. And then the 60 came along, and actually the 60 Ford was just a little bit more handsome than the Edsel. People buy them now, and they get all excited about them because there's so few available now. There's a guy called, his last name is Phoenix. I think I can find his name. I forgot his first. Oh, Charles Phoenix. Yes, he's such a funny guy. He loves antique cars, and most of them that he likes are Fords, Lincoln Mercurys, Edsels. But he'll come along and he'll walk around the car and he'll say, Edsel. EDSEL, for your pleasure, he goes. And he says, oh, it's such a beautiful car. And then he answers himself. He says, oh, it's such a beautiful car. And he goes, I know. And then he goes around and he points out all the E's on the car and all the pickles on the car and so forth and so on, and he's a riot. He's absolutely a riot to listen to. We just recently had a car meet at the Endicott. I believe there was well over 1,000 cars. I'm not going to tell you the exact amount that I believe we had, but it was over 1,000 cars, and the cars had to go past me. I directed them hopefully in the right category that they were supposed to be in. And so I got to see all the cars that came in. There's a couple of them that I was a little disappointed in. Last year we had a 1922 double Model T hearse. And
Nice.
they didn't get an award, and I was kind of bent out of that because it's one of the oldest cars there, and it wasn't the oldest car there, but it was one of the oldest cars there, and it should have got an award. It was beautiful. It was all by itself. You very seldom, how many double T Model Ts do you see in your lifetime that are hearses? And then this year we had another double Model T truck, and that did not get a prize either, and I was a little disappointed on that. So I'm going to request in our car club that we have 2 more awards that we give out. One for the oldest truck and one for the oldest car. Because we are an antique car club, we've invited in some muscle cars now. Actually, we invited in a lot of muscle cars. But we are still a antique car club.
Well, some of these muscle cars are really antiques. I mean, these cars out of the 60s,
Yeah.
you know, the Chevelles, the whatever, no, we don't think, I don't know, this is kind of funny. You don't seem to think of those cars as antiques.
Uh-huh.
But we grew up with those cars, and there was a lot of that street race and stuff like that. We don't want to talk too much about that. But we grew up with those cars, and it just makes you think, man, we're antiques too.
Yeah.
If you're driving antiques, well, you must be an antique.
We just have to worry about
But,
people kicking on our tires.
Yeah. But John, that was, I talked to you before the show, and you said, gee, we've got a show coming up, you got to go there. And I had been by the Endicott many times when they had functions, shows, and everything, but never went in, you know. And this show is so big out there, folks, that they had buses. You would drive down, and there was directions to this. I think it was a school. Maybe it was an elementary school. I don't remember. And you would go down there and park, and they would have buses ferrying you to and from the off-site location, which was pretty good. But like John said, there were a lot of cars there, and it was a hot day, and it was kind of tough trying to see everything because you were dying in the heat.
It's
but,
usually the hottest day of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it was really impressive to see that. And what's his name? The Rossis were there. They were in one of the little vehicles there helping out, setting up stuff or whatever. And it seemed strange seeing them coming down the hill there, and I go, "What are you guys doing there?" And that, you know. But gee, I would, you know, if you like antique cars, I mean, that is quite a show. And John, it seemed to me there were a lot of these people from out of state. I don't know how far.
We had
did they
people come from California.
Wow.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And one that really interested me was I forgot it's a Kaiser, and it was a sports car, 2-seater sports car, and the door slid into the side of the car, which was
like
kind of interesting.
Like on some of the modern.
Yeah, and we
Plymouth,
had that.
wagons.
We had that fellow for years and years. He would come to our car meets and drive across country.
Wow.
In his Kaiser.
Really?
And when after the pandemic, I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it got too old for us.
Yeah.
There was a friend of mine. He was driving up until he was 97 years old.
Wow.
And he had one Mercedes that he built himself from new old stock. It cost him over $1 million.
Ooh. Wow.
And it was gorgeous. We gave him first prize when he came to the show, and he didn't want the prize. He was proud about his cars, and that was it.
Yeah.
But he had 27 Lincolns, old antique Lincolns.
Really?
And I believe they were all gone within a month. They were all sold, all those antique Lincolns.
Yeah.
So
I remember seeing a picture of I guess it was the Zephyr back in the day. That was quite a car. I mean, it was a
there were
good-looking-
Zephyrs,
good-looking
yeah.
car.
Etzel Ford designed the Zephyr, and it was streamlined. It was just something that stood out, and that was Etzel's thing, to make something that stood out differently than everybody else's car.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a button on the floor in the early Lincoln Continentals. You hit the button with your foot and it changed the radio station.
Well, I remember the buttons that changed to your headlights. But
Right. Well, later on, the button became further in.
Yeah.
I've got a 1933 Ford Double B steak truck. It's all oak on the back, and she's red with black fenders. Her name is Ruby. She only answers to Ruby. And her top speed, safe top speed is 27 miles per hour.
And you have to pedal pretty fast.
Get the squirrels going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I blew the engine when I bought the truck, I don't know, a number of years ago. I think it was 10, 11 years ago. I bought the truck up in Maine. And the gentleman that sold it to me, he used to restore dealerships up in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont. And part of his reimbursement for his work was this 33 Ford stake truck. It was built in November of 1932, so Ruby will be 91 years old this year. But a lot of people love Ruby. They only know Ruby by her name. So.
John, another thing I was going to ask you, as I was brought up, and I think maybe a lot of folks out there, we're always told that the Ford dealership in Stoughton, I remember when it was on, basically with the post offices now, that it was one of the oldest Ford dealerships, and in fact, supposedly Henry Ford was actually, back in those days, was in Stoughton, and before that it was awarded. Do you know any of that history?
I honestly don't. I've been in Stoughton 30, I guess in 2 weeks I've been in Stoughton 37 years, if I'm not mistaken.
So you're a carpetbagger.
I was moving.
Yeah.
When I came into Stoughton, there was Stoughton Ford, and then Tanner Ford bought them, and they went to Easton, and now it's 24 Ford.
Yeah, that's had a history. I mean, it was Dench Ford for some time, and then it moved down to where Dana Barros has his basketball section now. It was called Bay State Ford. I think the owner's name was Bertoli, and he ran that for a while, and then I think eventually drifted into Easton and whatever, you know.
In the late 70s, I went into a Ford dealer named Williams Ford in West Hartford, Connecticut. And I wanted to become a salesman because I love cars so much. So they didn't want to hire me. I said, I don't understand why you don't want to hire me. See that car out there? That's a Buick. See that car out there? That's a Cadillac. See that? That's a Ford. That's a Lincoln. That's a Mercury. That's a Chrysler New Yorker. You know, well, because I knew so much about cars, they hired me, and I outsold the top 2 salesmen first month I was in the business. So they used to grit their teeth when they saw me. And part of my success, well, I tried to be honest. So that's number one. You can sell a car to somebody, but then if they don't think you're honest, they're going to tell their friend that, hey, I got screwed, they said this, and that they really meant something else. I tried to be truthful, so when people took their car home, they were satisfied. So that it kind of make a big difference. But also, the early cars had carburetors. And if the cars sat for a while, they'd get choked up. So the salesman would take a used car off the lot and try to sell it to a customer. And they couldn't sell it because it was choked up. You know, they'd hit the gas and the car would kick back. So I'd wait until all the salesmen tried each car, and I would pick out different cars in the used car lot that I liked. And one at a time, I took them home, and I blew them out, and I'd sell them the next day.
Wow.
And I wouldn't tell them what I did.
How'd you do that? Yeah. So. Yeah, it's funny. I guess one of the big things in this country are automobiles. I think since day one. And when you look back at some of these vehicles, now that we're talking all these electric vehicles, we had a lot of electric vehicles around the early 1900s. So, I mean, we all think of them as a novel idea, but the history of electric vehicles goes way back.
Yeah.
You know.
You know,
Way back.
we're having a little trouble with electric vehicles. It's a great idea, but it's not refined yet. There was a case less than, I can think a week ago, say, car blew up on the highway.
The Teslas are doing that, right?
The Teslas
Yeah.
have been doing that.
Yeah.
And they tell you not to put them in the garage. You know, my daughter lives in a condominium complex, really nice place, but there is no place, no way can she plug in a car where she's at. She's probably 65 feet from the parking spaces. And there's no way they can put enough charging stations up. And if you're putting energy into your electric car, it from dry to full charge it takes somewhere around 2 hours. Where I can stop at a gas station and fill my gas tank in
Yeah.
5 minutes.
So in that case, she probably would be forced to have some kind of a charger built into her garage. I don't know what that would cost to add.
Yeah, but you know,
add that kind of electrical power in your home, but it is kind of a hidden expense, like you
You'd
say,
have to
because if you
plug-
don't have that,
yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah, you have to plug the car in on the outside, not put it in the garage, because they're saying that these batteries need to be vented.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't have thought about that.
I just want to say a couple more things, and I'll just hand it to you.
Sure.
In 1903, Henry Ford and 12 others formed the Ford Motor Company. Henry owned 25.5% of the stock in the company. And by 1919, 16 years later, he acquired total interest in the car company for $105,821,000. Now that was a lot of money. If you multiply that by 40.5, you'll see how expensive that was.
Sure, it sounds like a lot of money for that day and age.
And I'd like to state one more thing.
John, we have
okay.
actually. I'm going to have to
Okay.
come back. We're
I
in our
understand.
closing
Sure.
sessions here, seconds. Yeah. So I want to thank you for coming. This has been very informative, and
you,
anybody that, and there are a lot of folks out there of all ages that love this stuff. So thanks for viewing, and thank you, John.
You're welcome. We did it.
Yeah, we can do another one sometime too if you want. If you want to go.
Perfect. Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.